My name is Catherine Harrison. I'm 25, and for years I've poured my energy into a small children's daycare my family runs. I'm the one wiping tears, calming tantrums, staying late to clean up glitter explosions and spilled juice. I don't complain because I've always believed that when you love what you do, the reward will come, eventually. At least, that's what I told myself. One evening, I was finishing up paperwork in the tiny office when my mom walked in with my older sister. I barely looked up until my sister's phone buzzed loudly on the desk. A huge payment notification flashed across her screen, the kind you only see in commercials. My sister's eyes widened. Then she smirked and tilted the screen so Mom could see better. "Wow, that hit fast," she said casually. "Thanks for the transfer. You really didn't have to pay me that much." My heart skipped. Pay her? For what? "Wait," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "You got paid for helping at the center?" My mother didn't even hesitate. She scoffed, waving a hand at me like I was being ridiculous. "Of course I paid your sister. She did a professional project. Your family, so you work for free." My sister leaned back in her chair, that smug little smirk never leaving her face as the notification still glowed between us like a slap. In that moment, something cracked inside me. Every late night, every unpaid extra shift, every time I'd told myself, "They'll notice one day," suddenly felt like a joke told at my expense. I swallowed hard, my pride burning more than my eyes. Without a word, I left. But days later, something unbelievable happened. Have you ever been told that you owe your family free labor while watching someone else get paid in front of you? Stay with me until the end of this story to see how I turned that cruel sentence back on them in a way they never saw coming. The next morning, I walked into the daycare with a knot in my stomach. On the outside, nothing had changed. Children running around, parents rushing in and out, the faint echo of cartoons drifting from the playroom. But inside me, a switch had flipped. I couldn't unhear my mother's voice. "Your family, so you work for free." I'd always thought I was doing something meaningful here, not just for the kids, but for my family. I helped design the learning schedule, decorated classrooms, even came in on weekends to set up special activities. I'd assumed we were all sacrificing together. But now I knew there were two different rulebooks, one for my sister and one for me. By lunchtime, my older sister finally breezed in, heels clicking on the hallway tiles. For years, I just called her my sister when talking about work. But at that moment, the name felt like a line being drawn. Samantha. She wore a sharp blazer, hair perfectly styled, looking like she was headed to a board meeting instead of a daycare. "Rough night?" she asked, glancing at me with a smug little half-smile as I wiped paint off a table. I forced a neutral tone. "Busy. The kids had an art day. How was your night?" I already knew the answer. "Rich." She shrugged. "Pretty good. Mom finally compensated me for that project I did. You know, branding, marketing, all those things you don't really get. It's about time someone around here recognized a professional contribution." My jaw tightened. "So, she paid you for that?" "Obviously." Samantha's eyes gleamed. "You can't expect real work to be done for free. That's just bad business." Real work. The words landed like a punch. I set down the cloth and turned to face her fully. "What about my work? The lesson plans? The parent meetings I cover for you? The days you cancel last minute and I stay late to fix your mess? Is that not real work?" She laughed softly. "You enjoy this. You're good with kids. You're basically doing what you'd be doing anyway. It's not the same as what I do. I bring in visibility, sponsors, and growth. You just maintain things. Besides, Mom told you, right? Family helps family. You of all people should understand that." "Funny," I said, my voice low, "because you're family too, but you're getting paid." Samantha's smile sharpened. "Maybe if you learned to think bigger, you'd stop obsessing over pennies." That was the moment I understood something ugly. It wasn't just favoritism. In their eyes, my labor was expected, automatic, disposable. Hers was valuable, professional, billable. I remembered countless times I'd suggested ideas that somehow became Samantha's projects later, with my name scrubbed out. Did you use my ideas in that project? I asked slowly. The sensory play corners, the parent connection newsletter, the social media series with the kids' artwork. Those were mine. She rolled her eyes. You mentioned things in passing. I'm the one who packaged them into something marketable. That's the difference between a hobbyist and a strategist. Hobbyist, strategist. The labels told me exactly where she placed me on her private ladder. I'm not your free idea factory, I said, or mom's unpaid assistant. I deserve to be treated fairly. She leaned in just enough that only I could hear her. Then stop acting like help and start acting like someone who can't be replaced. Her words lit a spark of rage and clarity inside me. Replaceable? I'd been the one actually keeping the place running while they played businesswoman and visionary. But if they thought I was replaceable, maybe it was time to prove just how deeply I understood this daycare, maybe better than either of them. As she walked away, still basking in her payment glow, a cold thought formed in my mind. If my work had no value here, I needed to figure out exactly what my value had been. To them, on paper. And if they'd been using me all this time, I wanted undeniable proof. Have you ever realized in a single conversation that someone you love doesn't see you as an equal, but as convenient, free labor? Would you swallow it and keep going, or would you start digging for the truth like I was about to? That night, I couldn't shake the sense that my life had been one long, quiet discount for everyone around me. Not just at the daycare, but at home, too. The more I replayed conversations with Samantha, the more old memories started resurfacing. Memories I had always brushed away as just family stuff. I remembered high school group projects where I'd done most of the work while Samantha, already in college, helped me polish my presentation. Later, she'd tell my mother that I wouldn't have passed without her guidance, and somehow the praise always went her way. I remembered the time I spent a summer designing a colorful activity wall for the daycare. Months later, my mom mentioned at a family dinner how Samantha's eye for design had transformed the center. My name never came up. It wasn't just about money, it was about being erased. The next day after closing, I decided I couldn't keep this conversation only in my head. I went straight home instead of staying late to tidy up like I usually did. My mother was at the dining table surrounded by folders and printed spreadsheets from the daycare. My heart started pounding. This was where the decisions were made, the ones I was never invited into. "Mom," I said, taking a seat across from her, "we need to talk about yesterday." She looked up over her glasses, already wary. "If this is about your sister getting paid, I thought we'd settled that." "She did specialized work." "No," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "We didn't settle it. You dismissed me. There's a difference." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Catherine, don't start. I'm exhausted. Your sister helped rebrand the center. She brought in new families. She negotiated partnerships. That's a different level of contribution. And what I do every day isn't?" I leaned forward. I'm the one parents trust. I'm the one who stays when staff quit suddenly. When a child has a meltdown or a parent needs a last-minute meeting, I handle it. I've given years of unpaid work because you told me we were building something together. "You are being dramatic," she snapped. "We're a family business. Family pitches in. Samantha has her own expenses, a different lifestyle." "There it is again," I cut in. "She gets paid because she has real expenses. What do you think I have? A fantasy life? I pay rent. I have student loans. I buy groceries. Why is her time worth money and mine worth a thank you text, if that?" Her eyes flashed. "Because she takes on responsibilities you don't. You're good with kids, but she carries the brand, the image." I almost laughed. The brand that's built on my work with those kids, on the photos I took, the programs I created, the relationships I built. She packages what I do, and you write her a check for it. That's not image. That's using me as free material. She slammed her pen down. Don't you dare accuse me of using you. I've given you a place to work, to gain experience. Most mothers would kill for a daughter who can be part of the family's legacy. You should be grateful. There it was again. That word that scraped across my nerves. Grateful. Grateful for what? I asked quietly. For being invisible on the payroll? For watching my ideas be presented under someone else's name? For hearing you say, to my face, that my role is to work for free because I'm family? My mother's shoulders stiffened. She avoided my eyes, flipping a spreadsheet as if the numbers on it mattered more than what I had just said. Life isn't always fair, Catherine. We all have roles. Samantha is the face. You're the heart. Not everything has to be balanced dollar for dollar. Funny, I said bitterly, because the dollars all seem to go in one direction. For a moment, there was silence. Then she pulled in a deep breath. If you don't like it, no one is forcing you to stay. But don't accuse me of being unfair when you chose this. You chose to help. You chose to be here. That sentence hurt more than all the others combined, because it twisted my loyalty into consent. I chose to believe you'd do right by me, I answered. That's not the same thing. Her phone buzzed with a new notification. She picked it up, glanced at it, and muttered, I don't have time for this. We'll talk later. But we both knew later meant never. I stood up slowly, something raw and sharp forming inside me. If she wasn't going to admit the imbalance, I needed another way to show it. To her, to Samantha, to myself. Have you ever realized that the people you trusted most were quietly benefiting from your loyalty while calling it love or family duty? At what point does helping turn into being used? And how would you prove it if no one wants to listen? I left the house feeling hollow, like someone had scooped out everything soft inside me and replaced it with cold steel. I didn't go back to my apartment right away. Instead, my feet carried me to the small park a few blocks away, the one I'd retreated to after long days at the daycare. Not to cry, not this time, just to think. I sat on a bench, replaying the conversation with my mother in my head, dissecting every excuse she'd given. Family business, legacy, grateful. Words that sounded noble until you looked at the bank transfers behind them. Kath? A familiar voice called out. I turned to see James walking toward me, hands in his pockets. He'd been my friend since college, the kind of friend who noticed when I was off, even when I tried to hide it. You look like you're about to punch the sky, he said, sitting beside me. What happened? It's my mom and my sister, I said, exhaling slowly. It's always them. He gave me that patient look he always did when he knew I needed to unload. So I told him. The payment notification on Samantha's phone, my mother's sentence about family working for free, the condescending comments, the argument at the dining table. By the time I finished, my hands were clenched so tight my knuckles hurt. James was quiet for a moment. Let me get this straight, he finally said. You've been working there for how long? Years, I replied. Since I was a teenager, really. Full-time the last few years. And you've never been formally paid? No contract, no salary, no bonuses? Just small cash here and there, I admitted. She calls it pocket money when she remembers. But no, nothing official. Meanwhile, Samantha shows up occasionally, repackages my ideas, and gets wired thousands. He shook his head slowly. Kath, that's not just favoritism. That's financial exploitation. If it were any other employer, everyone would call it what it is. It's my mom, I said weakly, even though the excuse sounded thinner every time I used it. It's our family business. I kept telling myself things would even out when the center grew. Has it? He asked. Or has it just grown for them while you stay stuck? The question sat heavily between us. I don't even know how to prove any of it, I murmured. To her, it's all justified. She thinks she's doing the right thing, at least that's what she says. Samantha acts like I'm being childish for caring. James leaned forward. Do you know who handles the finances? Like, really handles them? Not just the day-to-day stuff, but where the money goes, who gets bonuses, what's in the contracts. My mom and Samantha, I said. They're the ones with access to the accounts, the partnership agreements, all of it. I handle the kids, staff schedules, parent communications. I've never been invited into those meetings. Then that's your first problem, he replied. Right now, it's your word against theirs. You feel used. They say you're helping. Feelings don't win arguments like this. Evidence does. Evidence, I repeated, the word tasting both terrifying and empowering. Like, what? Transaction records? Contracts? Emails? Messages? Anything that shows your contributions and the way they've been rewarding themselves versus you, he said calmly. If you want them to see the truth, or if you ever need to protect yourself legally, you can't rely on, but I worked hard. You need proof. The idea of looking behind the curtain of my family's business made my stomach twist. If I dig into that, they'll say I'm betraying them. What are they doing to you right now? He asked gently. Is that not a betrayal? I stared at my hands. He wasn't wrong. I'd been so busy trying to be the good daughter that I hadn't stopped to ask whether anyone else was being a good parent or a good sister to me. What if I find something worse than I expect? I asked. What if it's not just about me being unpaid? What if there's real wrongdoing? Then you'll finally know what you're dealing with, James said. And you'll have a choice. You can keep pretending this is just about hurt feelings, or you can decide what your boundaries really are. His words sparked something in me. For years, I'd let my family narrate my role. Helper, caretaker, unpaid heart of the daycare. But what if I rewrote that narrative? What if I stopped being just a character in their story and started being the author of my own? I don't know if I'm ready to blow up my family, I confessed. Maybe you're not blowing them up, he replied. Maybe you're just turning on the lights. What they've built should survive that, if it's built on anything decent at all. We sat in silence for a moment. Okay, I finally said. Then I'm going to look. I know where some of the financial records are at the center. If I can get a clear picture of what's actually going on, what they've paid her, what they haven't paid me, maybe I can finally stop doubting myself. James nodded. Whatever you find, you won't deal with it alone. Call me, text me, whatever. Just be careful. People don't like it when you mess with their money. His warning lingered in my mind. My family loved to talk about sacrifice and loyalty, but apparently those things only flowed one way. If I opened the door to the truth, there would be no going back. Have you ever reached that point where you're more afraid of staying in the dark than you are of what the truth might reveal? If you were in my place, would you risk tearing your family's image apart just to see where the money and the respect really went? 2 mornings later, I arrived at the daycare earlier than usual. The building felt strange without the usual noise, like a stage before the actors arrived. My heart hammered, but my hands were steady. I wasn't doing anything wrong, I told myself. I was just verifying reality. The main office door was usually locked, but I knew where my mother kept the spare key. She trusted me with the kids, but never with the numbers. Today, I was about to change that. I slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind me. The computer on my mother's desk blinked sleepily. I sat down and moved the mouse. The login screen appeared. For a second, panic flared, until I remembered the password she'd once dictated over the phone when she was rushing and didn't think I was really listening. I typed it in. The system opened. Bank statements, payroll, vendor lists, partnership agreements. Files that had always been discussed in vague summaries were now right in front of me, full of actual numbers instead of slogans about our shared future. I clicked into the payroll reports first. My name was there, but only as volunteer coordinator with no salary line, no bonus column, no benefits. It was as if the system itself believed I didn't exist financially. Then I searched for Samantha's name. Her records told a different story. Consulting fees, strategic brand development, campaign bonuses. Each entry carried amounts that made my eyes widen. Month after month of transfers, some labeled as performance incentives, others as extra compensation approved by management. Management meaning my mother. The total, when I added it up, was obscene. All that money had flowed to someone who could pick and choose when she wanted to show up. Meanwhile, I'd been patching together rent with side babysitting jobs when the daycare closed. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, numb. Then a wave of anger rushed through me, not the messy, desperate anger I'd felt before, but something colder, sharper. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a system. I started copying everything I could, downloading PDFs, emailing them to my personal account, taking photos with my phone. If they decided to lock me out later, I wouldn't be empty-handed. I was so focused that I didn't hear the footsteps at first. "Catherine!" a voice whispered from the doorway. I jerked around, pulse spiking. It wasn't my mother. It was one of our former staff members, Marta, who had come back to drop off some paperwork for a reference letter my mom had promised her. "Marta," I exhaled, trying to steady my voice. "You scared me." She glanced at the computer screen, then back at me. "You're not supposed to be in here, are you?" "Depends on who you ask," I said. "I'm trying to understand why I've been working for years and never seen a formal paycheck while my sister has been getting bonuses big enough to buy a car." Marta's expression shifted from surprise to something that looked like recognition. "So, you finally noticed?" "What do you mean?" I demanded. "Did you know about this?" She walked in and closed the door quietly behind her. "I didn't know the exact numbers," she said slowly, "but I knew something was off. Your sister would show up once every few weeks, talk loudly about strategy, and then leave with your mom to celebrate some so-called business win. Meanwhile, you were here every day, doing the real work." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, more hurt than accusatory. "Because it wasn't my place," she replied. "And because when I started asking questions about how overtime was handled and why some staff weren't getting promised bonuses, things got tense. I left before it got uglier." My chest tightened. "Wait, other people were being underpaid too?" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I wasn't going to get involved again," she said, "but if you're finally ready to see what's going on, you should know everything." She scrolled and opened her voice recording app. "I didn't plan to use these, but I recorded a couple of meetings. I wanted protection in case they tried to blame me for anything. Your mom and sister liked to talk in the office when they thought no one was around." She tapped one recording and hit play. My mother's voice crackled through the speakers. "Catherine loves those kids. She'd never leave, even if we don't put her on payroll yet. She knows this is all for the family." Then Samantha's voice. "Why pay her when she's already doing it for free? Once we grow more, we'll see. Right now, we need to reward the work that actually brings in money." I felt physically sick. Another recording. Marta's own voice asking about unpaid overtime. My mother brushing her off. Samantha suggesting they phase out anyone who complained too much. My stomach churned listening to how casually they dismissed people's livelihoods, including mine, as emotional overreactions. Marta paused the audio. "This is why I left," she said quietly. "It wasn't just favoritism, it was a mindset. Anyone who pushed back was difficult or ungrateful. I didn't want to stick around and become the next problem to be phased out." My hands shook as I took her phone and forwarded the files to myself. "Thank you," I managed. "You didn't have to share this." "Maybe I did," she replied. "Because, Catherine, whatever you decide to do next, you need to know you're not imagining things. You're not being dramatic. This is real, and it's wrong." Footsteps sounded in the hallway again, this time heavier, more familiar. My mother's voice carried through the door, talking to a parent on the phone. I scrambled to close the files and log out, my heart pounding. Go, Marta whispered. We'll pretend we were just talking about my reference letter. By the time my mother pushed the door open, I was standing at the side of the desk, chatting casually with Marta about her job applications. My mother barely glanced at us, her eyes already on the stack of folders. But I saw her differently now. Not just as my mother, not just as a tired business owner, as someone who had made very deliberate choices about whose work counted, whose didn't, and who deserved to be compensated for their loyalty. I left the office that day with more than just suspicion. I left with proof. If you discovered recordings of your own family calmly justifying why you, and others, deserve to be underpaid or unpaid, would you confront them quietly, or would you be tempted to make sure they could never deny it again? Once I had the documents and recordings, my anger shifted into something more strategic. Rage alone wouldn't change anything. I needed a plan, one that would force my mother and Samantha to face what they'd done without giving them a chance to bury the evidence or spin the story. James was the first person I showed everything to. We sat in my small kitchen that evening, laptop open, files spread out, my phone playing those uncomfortable recordings on low volume. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening more with every new piece of information. This isn't just unfair, he finally said. This is systemic. They built this entire setup on the assumption that you'd never push back. Yeah, I said, my voice steady. They counted on my loyalty. My silence. What do you want to do? He asked. I want them to stop pretending this is love, I replied. I want them to admit what they've done. And I want it to have real consequences. Not just for me, but for everyone they've treated like this. You could go straight to a lawyer, he suggested, or to whatever board oversees child care centers in the city. I could, I said slowly. And maybe I will. But first, I want them to hear their own words. I want them to know I know. After everything I've given them, they owe me at least that much. So we crafted a scenario they couldn't easily escape from. I invited my mother and Samantha to dinner at my apartment, framing it as a family meeting about the daycare's future. I said I had some ideas for growing the business and wanted to talk about formalizing my role. The words tasted ironic, but believable. Finally, my mother had said on the phone, you're thinking about the bigger picture. Samantha will bring some proposals too. Perfect. The night of the dinner, I set the table simply but carefully. It wasn't about impressing them. It was about control. James was there, not as a visible ally, but as a neutral friend who was curious about investing in childcare in the future. His presence made the setting feel less like an ambush and more like a serious conversation. They arrived dressed like they were heading to a pitch meeting. Samantha carried a laptop bag. My mother clutched a folder. Wow, this looks nice, Samantha said as she walked in. You didn't have to go all out. I didn't, I replied. I just wanted us all in the same room, without kids or clients or distractions, to talk honestly. We ate for a while, conversations circling around safe topics: work, the economy, future plans. My mother mentioned how lucky I was to have a secure place in the family business. I almost choked on my drink. Finally, I set my fork down. I think it's time we talk about compensation, I said. The air shifted. My mother glanced at Samantha, then at me. Compensation? For my years of work, I clarified. For the roles I've taken on without a formal contract. For the fact that I've been working as full-time core staff while being treated as a volunteer on paper. Catherine, my mother began, already exasperated. We've talked about this. The daycare hasn't been profitable enough to pay you a full salary yet. Your sister's contributions are documented, I cut in. Very clearly, in the payroll reports, in the bank statements, in the line items labeled consulting fees and strategic development, and performance bonuses. I know exactly how much she's been paid. I know how often. I know for how long. Samantha's eyes narrowed. Have you been snooping through confidential files? I met her gaze. I've been reading records from my workplace. Records that directly affect me. My mother's voice hardened. That information is sensitive. You had no right. I had every right, I said, my own voice rising now. Because while those records show tens of thousands going to Samantha, they show zero going to me. Zero. For years. While you've both talked about family sacrifice and shared legacy, they shifted uncomfortably. I didn't give them space to recover. I also know what you say when you think no one else is listening, I continued. I picked up my phone, opened the recording Marta had given me, and hit play. The room filled with my mother's voice. Catherine loves those kids. She'd never leave, even if we don't put her on payroll yet. She knows this is all for the family. Then Samantha's. Why pay her when she's already doing it for free? My mother's face went pale. Samantha's went red. That's taken out of context, my mother said quickly. We were under pressure. I have multiple recordings, I cut in, and documents, and timestamps. How much more context do you need? Samantha snapped. So what? You're spying on us now. This is psychotic, Catherine. Marta recorded those meetings to protect herself, I replied. Because when she questioned unpaid overtime and missing bonuses, you labeled her difficult and talked about phasing her out. You turned people's loyalty into leverage, including mine. James, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. From an outside perspective, he said calmly, this looks very bad, especially if the daycare were ever audited, or if someone filed a formal complaint. My mother's head swiveled toward him. And who exactly are you? Someone who cares about Catherine, he answered, unfazed. And someone who knows this could seriously damage the daycare's reputation and licensing if it went beyond this room. Samantha glared at me. Is this your plan? Blackmail us? Threaten to destroy everything we've built? No, I said evenly. My plan is to stop letting you pretend this is love when it's exploitation. My plan is to make sure I'm never again told, "Your family, so you work for free," while watching you transfer money to yourselves behind closed doors. My mother's voice trembled. What do you want, Catherine? First, I said, I want everything on record. Back pay for my years of work, at a fair rate. A formal contract with a salary, benefits, and clear responsibilities. Transparent payroll for all staff, not just your favorites. And a written commitment to change the way compensation decisions are made. And if we say no? Samantha challenged. I held her gaze. Then I file what I have, with the board that licenses daycare centers, with a lawyer, with anyone who needs to see it. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt before. For the first time, I watched my mother calculate risk, not just emotion. She looked at James, at the phone in my hand, at Samantha, whose bravado had finally begun to crack. You'd do that? My mother whispered. To your own family? You already did this to me, I answered softly. I'm just refusing to let it stay hidden. Have you ever seen the people who hold power over you realize, in real time, that you no longer fit neatly in the box they built for you? If you were sitting at that table, surrounded by family who'd profited from your silence, would you back down? Or would you finally force them to choose between change and exposure? The weeks after that dinner felt like living in a different universe, one where everyone moved more carefully, as if the ground could split open at any moment. At first, my mother tried to negotiate in small, safe steps. She offered me a modest salary to start, insisted that back pay was complicated, and suggested we gradually introduce transparency measures for other staff. It was the same old pattern. Do the least possible and hope my love for the family would do the rest. But something in me had changed. Once you've seen the spreadsheets and heard the recordings, you can't unknow them. You can't go back to calling exploitation helping. I've spoken to a legal advisor. I told her one afternoon in the office, my voice calm. They confirmed that what's been happening is not just morally wrong, but potentially actionable. Underpayment, misclassification, misuse of funds earmarked as bonuses for staff. If you want to fix this quietly, it has to be real. No half measures. She looked tired in a way I'd never seen before, not just physically drained, but emotionally cornered. You'd really drag this through the mud? She asked. Our name, our reputation, everything we've built? You did that the moment you decided some of us deserved to be invisible, I said. I'm giving you a chance to repair it before someone else forces you to. It wasn't just a bluff. I'd already spoken with Marta and one other ex-staff member who had similar stories. If my mother chose denial over change, I wouldn't be standing alone. Eventually, the fear of outside consequences outweighed her desire to control the narrative. A formal audit was initiated, internally first, then with the help of an external accountant she begrudgingly hired. The numbers laid everything bare: years of skewed bonuses, unexplained consulting fees, missing staff incentives. Samantha's name popped up again and again in places it didn't belong. The fallout came in waves. Samantha was forced to resign from any official role connected to the daycare. My mother tried to frame it as a mutual decision and time for her to explore new opportunities. But the truth was simple. Her shadow consulting had become a liability. The repayment plan they eventually agreed on meant that a chunk of those bonuses had to be returned to the business or redistributed to staff who had been shortchanged. For someone who had built her identity on always landing on top, the public absence from the daycare's website and social media hit Samantha harder than she let on. The message was clear. Her days of cashing in on my work, unseen and unchallenged, were over. As for me, my role was finally defined in ink, not just an expectation. We drafted a contract with a lawyer's oversight, a real salary, benefits, back pay, not everything I technically deserved, but enough to prove that my mother understood the difference between family helping and family being exploited. All staff roles were reviewed and adjusted. Time tracking became mandatory. Bonuses were documented and shared transparently with the team. Some days, looking at my name on the payroll, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and grief. This was what I'd wanted for so long, but I resented how hard I'd had to fight for something that should have been basic respect. My relationship with my mother didn't magically heal. There were awkward silences, apologies that came out clumsy and incomplete, moments where she slipped back into old habits, and I had to calmly remind her that things were different now. "Do you really think I never loved you?" she asked me once, voice tight. "I know you loved me," I answered. "But love that asks one person to give everything and another to collect the rewards isn't the kind of love I'm willing to accept anymore." As for Samantha, our interactions became rare and brittle. She oscillated between anger and defensiveness, blaming me for ruining her comfortable setup. "You could have just kept this between us," she said during one bitter phone call. "We're sisters." "We are?" I replied. "That's why I gave you the chance to face it in a private room before anyone else saw it. You chose denial. I chose myself. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd gone too far, if I'd permanently fractured my family for the sake of money and principle. But then I'd remember the moment my mother said, she'd never leave, even if we don't pay her. And I'd realize this wasn't just about money. It was about what they believed I was worth. In the daycare itself, something else shifted too. Staff who had once been afraid to ask questions started speaking up. One of the newer teachers pulled me aside and said, "Thank you for whatever you did. I don't know the details, but things feel safer now." That meant more to me than any line on a contract. As for me, I stopped seeing myself as just the girl who loves the kids. I started seeing myself as someone whose work, time, and boundaries mattered. Maybe I'd stay at the daycare for years. Maybe I'd eventually open my own center or move into advocacy. But whatever I did, I knew one thing. No one would ever again be allowed to hide exploitation behind the sentence, "Your family, so you work for free." If your own mother told you that your love meant you didn't deserve to be paid, while your sibling cashed in on your effort, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you risk breaking the illusion of perfect family to build something more honest, even if it changed everything forever?